Hello and welcome to the Cash Car Convert Podcast, episode number 31.
You're listening to the Cash Car Convert Podcast with James Kinson.
Hey everyone, this is James Kinson. I am the Cash Car Convert. Welcome to another episode of the Cash Car Convert Podcast. This is the podcast where cash cars are cool and auto debt is dangerous to your financial future. On today's show, I have a gentleman who has served as the executive pastor of financial stewardship at Gateway Church in Southlake, Texas since 2006. He's a fan of cycling and an avid skateboarder. His book, Generous Life Journey, is the culmination of over 10 years of faith, struggles, and obedience to carry out a very clear and precise vision God gave him on how to build a stewardship ministry. It's also the story of how his encounter with God forever changed his life course and taught him how you handle finances is an issue of your heart. With that, please welcome Gunnar Johnson to the show. Hi, Gunnar.
Hey, glad to be here.
Thank you. At the Cash Car Convert Podcast, we always like to start with the same question, and that is, what was the first car you ever had, and how did you come by that vehicle?
Oh, that's a great question. My first car was really funny. It was a 1967 Ford Econoline van. It was white, and we had put some Krager rims on it. My dad bought it for me with the engine disassembled in a box, and I had to rebuild the car before I could drive it. And it was this flat-faced, huge steering wheel that set parallel to the ground and 3-speed on the tree. It was extremely slow. And, of course, I had to rebuild the engine a couple of times due to my lack of mechanical skills as a teenager.
My dad used to have those vans. He had several of them over the years. He worked as a painter, but I think it's a blessing to learn how to work on vehicles. Now I know that today the vehicles are have so much computer technology in them. It's not quite the same as it was for a '67 Ford, but still you know inside and out how an engine works, and that's got to be very helpful to you. Really, anytime you're trying to diagnose what might be going on with the vehicle that you have, right?
Yeah, that was really helpful. And the other thing that was kind of entertaining about the car was I had a massive stereo system in the car, and you could hear me coming from miles away. I think the stereo system was worth a lot more than the actual vehicle.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and I don't think those vans had a lot of power either, so you were probably pretty safe on that front as well.
Very slow.
Well, hey, Gunnar, I wanted to jump in your story. I read your book. I really enjoyed it, and it's not often that I've met somebody that I'm interviewing, but you and I have met at the church a few times, and I've been very impressed with the way you carry yourself, and again, what you've done with your book. But I wanted to kind of get some background information on you in terms of how you came to be at Gateway. Were you raised in church? What's your background and what brought you to this place?
Well, I was raised in church, but I went through a season in my early 20s where I really wrestled with God, wrestled with the existence of God, and then if God exists, and is this Bible really for us today, and is it translated accurately, and all that kind of stuff. So I was in a period of searching. I was also a dedicated businessman. I wanted to be very successful in business and to be wealthy, actually. So I had started going back to church just kind of as a novelty, more or less. And I owned a carpet cleaning franchise at the time where I was the youngest carpet cleaning franchise owner in this whole system. Well, I noticed at the church they had a class on what the Bible said on money. Now, I was quite put off by that because I thought it was a trick for the church to get me to give more. Right. And yet I took the class, and I was fascinated that all these timeless principles of wise money management were scattered throughout the whole Bible. In fact, there's more than 2,300 scriptures on money, and Jesus gave 17 out of his 38 parables using money as a medium. There's a lot of material in there. And as a young, sophisticated business owner, I thought, this is curious to me. However, I found that my life didn't line up with Scripture, and I began to go through a heart transformation where I simply said, Lord, use me as you will. I just want to follow you the rest of my life. And he began to show me some areas that I violated Scripture.
And once he did that, did you take action right away to make those changes, or was it something you struggled with over time? How did you deal with that realization?
Well, I'm kind of an all or nothing type personality. And so the first major hurdle I had to get past was the giving hurdle. Giving is an indication of your heart. And I was not a giver. So I began to give, and then God began to reveal things to me. And the second hurdle that I crossed was the debt hurdle. Now, we had made a lot of money, and we were doing quite well on the offensive side of the equation. But the more we made, the more we spent. And just like our United States government, not only did we overspend our income, we were accumulating debt quite quickly. So I had $88,000 in unsecured debt. And I decided, this isn't going to work. I've got to turn this around and get out of debt, and I've got to get my finances in order. And that's when we began to make some radical lifestyle changes.
Yeah, that sounds a little bit like my story. I had $70,000 in unsecured debt, plus car payments that totaled another, $500 in there, and in terms of monthly payments. And my wife and I both made a good income. So it wasn't about how much money we had. It was, the offensive side, as you rightly stated. It was the defensive side. We were just being really unintentional with our money. We weren't really doing anything to budget or keep any kind of handle on what we were doing. So yeah, I completely get where you're coming from on that. It sounds all too familiar, and I suspect there's a lot of listeners out there who feel quite the same way.
Well, we were very, very frustrated, but the Bible didn't leave us unaware, and God began to walk us through how to get our finances in shape. So one of the areas that I had to reel in was obviously the car area, and we actually went through a process of selling our business and moving from the Dallas-Fort Worth, Texas area down to South Florida, where I started another company, but this time debt-free, and it was a drywall company. And I had been driving a really nice extended cab GMC truck. It was brand new. And I sold that truck, and I bought a junky work van. Now, this wasn't any junky work van. It had a secondary life as a mosquito killer. So I'd start it up in the morning. I'd put a jug of water on the accelerator, and that would warm it up at a high RPM, and it just blows smoke everywhere. So everywhere I went, there was this cloud of haze and smoke behind me. And I drove that truck until I had the money in my business to pay cash for my next work van. But it was really hard to go from a brand new, cool, pickup truck to a junky, smoky van.
Yeah, that is so much the difficult thing, and especially in our society where people really wrap their egos around the vehicles that they drive. And we've got all the commercials on TV with some of the best advertising companies in the world, selling that message. So yeah, I mean, you really had to put your ego in check to do that. And that's what I encourage my listeners to do, is to, put their ego in check, dial back the vehicles a little bit, and give themselves some breathing room to be able to do something else in their life. So you drove that van, which sounds like it might be the kind of van where you had to ask the question, how many miles does it get to the quart of oil? So you were in the drywall business down there, and so how long did you stay down there and do that? And were you still moving towards the ministry at that point, or were you doing volunteer work? What kinds of things were you doing around the church at that time?
Yeah, great question. I was moving towards ministry because I was fascinated with this area of the Bible and money. So we lowered our lifestyle. We began to get out of debt. Our business began to grow. We used the cash to pay off the debt and to also grow without any debt. And we were very intentional about our overhead. I knew God had called me into full-time ministry at some point, so we were cautiously moving forward in our lifestyle. But yeah, I started after about 2 or 3 years. I started volunteering with a ministry called Crown Financial Ministry.
Yeah.
And they trained me. It was Larry Burkett at the time and Howard Dayton. And they trained me how to be a financial coach. And I just loved helping people who had no hope and were very, very frustrated. I loved watching them get on their feet financially, and I loved watching the miracles that happened along the way. So I started volunteering every Thursday at my little church in South Florida, and gradually went on staff with Crown Ministry, but my drywall company paid all my expenses. And eventually, after a number of years, had the opportunity to sell my drywall business and go full-time in ministry back in Texas.
Okay. So, there was a story that you told, and I found it really fascinating as it relates to trusting God and what He's asking you to do, because it's one of those things that with 2020 hindsight, it's always easy for those of us who are reading a story to say, "Wow, that's really great. That was very bold," and they really moved with God. But can you tell the story about how God asked you to start cutting back on your workload and how you felt about that and how that ultimately turned out?
Yeah, in construction, if you're not working, you're not making money. So I was working 6 days a week, sometimes 7 days a week. If we had work, I worked. Sun up to sundown, 70, 80 hours a week was normal. And at this time, I was married, had a young baby, felt convicted by it because I wasn't spending enough time at home. So I cut back to 6 days a week, and then I cut back to 5 days a week. Now, it was funny. As I cut back work, that meant there were certain builders I couldn't do their homes. And they would ask, well, okay, what's going on? I'd tell them. They'd say, okay, well, who are you working for? And I'd tell them the builders I was working with, and they'd say, what are they paying you? Because we'd like to have you on our projects. We'll pay you more. So kind of ended up with a little bit of a bidding war with the home builders that I worked for. And the year that I cut back from 7 to 5 days a week, and even began to cut back to 4 days a week to serve one day at my church, that year I made about $40,000 more than the previous year.
Wow.
So it was crazy. I mean, God's economy doesn't always make mathematical sense, but I sure like it better than mine.
Yeah, I just love that story when I read it because it's so counterintuitive that that you could actually pull back and do something where you're enjoying time with your family. You're volunteering at your church, so you're being generous with your time, and have it work out that way. I mean, that's just beautiful. Yeah, I mean, it's amazing when God calls you to do something and you move in His path. It's amazing what can happen. Okay, so one of the things I really enjoyed in your book is where you talked about the top 10 car mistakes that people make. And since I hear about a lot of those from the people that I deal with, I thought it might be interesting to have you talk about like the top 2 or 3 on your list.
Yeah, I'd love to. The first one that I see is not actually knowing where they stand financially and buying a car without a proper budget. I had a guy that was leasing a Lexus, and he made about $70,000 a year, but he spent almost $30,000 a year on his car lease. I could not believe it. I was shocked. It was like $2,400, somewhere around there a month for a car lease on a Lexus. Now, he'd been upside down on the previous car, and anyway, so on and so forth. He was in a mess. But he bought the car not actually thinking about what his income was. And he had good enough credit, so he qualified for it. Well, on a smaller scale, I find people doing that all the time. They're in a crunch. They need a car, and so they end up with a whole lot more car than they really can afford. And then they're just working basically to pay for their depreciating asset. Not a good idea. Not a good idea.
Well, absolutely not. Yeah, that's true. And that is one of those traps. And I think that's something that is increasing a bit with leasing as, so many people, instead of like the average car payment's $471 and the average lease payment's about $420. And I think that a lot of people, they look at whatever car payment they're looking at and they think, wow, if I lease, I can get this next higher level of car at a lower price. And so I think more people wind up still having that $471 a month car payment, but now they're doing it in a lease and they have a nicer car. So I think a lot of people are upgrading using financing, and certainly I don't think that's a good idea. So okay, well, yeah, that's a good one. What else is
another one is to buy the wrong car. So a buddy of mine, when the Hemi-powered Dodge trucks came out, he called me up and he said, I got this really cool truck. You should check it out. And I was excited for him, but I got to thinking, he's got over a 100-mile round trip commute. And gas was beginning to climb. Gas price was climbing at that point. So I said, well, isn't it going to be expensive to drive back and forth to work? And he goes, yeah, it's going to be a little more. And I said, well, isn't your commute like over 100 miles a day? He's like, yeah. And I said, well, what kind of gas mileage does it get? He's like, it gets like, low, like maybe 10, 11. And he had not sat down and done the math to calculate how much this car is going to cost him on a long commute. And it ate his lunch. the gas payments alone were more than what he was spending for the car.
Boy, that's amazing. I don't oftentimes find that that for most cars that the gas, I mean, it depends on people's commute, but in general, I think people weight way too heavily, gas mileage, and they'll overpay for something that they think is going to give them better gas mileage, and it winds up really costing them more money because the gas, for their type of commuting wasn't as much. And that's, you just kind of gave us an opposite view there, but that goes back to, I think people should kind of have a total cost of ownership figured out for a vehicle before they buy. There's a tool on Edmunds that's really great for that, and it will help you figure out not only the gas but the maintenance and typical repair bills for that car over its life. And it's a really great tool. So yeah, that's another really great story. And I see people doing that sort of thing all the time myself. So all right, so what's another one you got?
Another one is car dealership bullying. You go into a dealership to shop around, and next thing you know, you've bought way more car than you anticipated because they talked you into it using pressure. And now most car dealerships are really good, but there's a few really, really bad ones out there that give the rest of them a bad reputation. So I went to a dealership one time and I'd been looking at about a 5-year-old Suburban for my family. And I go in, the first thing the guy says is, after greeting me, he wanted me to sign a paper that said if we agreed on terms that I would buy the vehicle today. Well, that violates a lot of things in my mind, several scriptures that violates, but also I don't make impulsive decisions, and I wasn't about to do that. So he was really, really pushy with me, and I insisted on a pre-purchase inspection by my mechanic, and he reluctantly let me do it. Well, I got the car back to my mechanic, and it wasn't but 30 minutes later, and what we found was that the car had been completely rotted by salt underneath. The frame had been rotted, and they had sandblasted the frame and repainted it with like a black polyurethane to cover it up. Had my family been in that car in a wreck, it would have folded up like a tin can. But I insisted on having that car inspected, and I would have made a major financial mistake had I not done that. So you got to be careful. Some of these dealerships use high pressure sales techniques, and they don't really care about you or your financial well-being. They only care about the sale of that car. Not all dealerships are this way. There are some fantastic dealerships out there, but there are some that make the rest of them look bad. Yeah,
absolutely right. And that's, that goes back to another thing that I ask people to do, and that is have a mechanic inspect their vehicles before they buy. It's just, it's so much better. And you were really savvy about cars too. I mean, you rebuilt the engine in your van. So, I mean, you knew your way around a vehicle, and yet this might not have been something you would have caught. I mean, I don't know if maybe it was the kind of thing you'd only see when it was up on a lift or something.
No, I would not have caught it. I had crawled under that car and everything. I didn't see it. And my friend, who's a mechanic, he's really, really thorough. And once he caught it, once he figured it out, it was obvious. But I almost made a big mistake.
Wow. So there you go, folks. I mean, even if you, are well-trained and know a lot about cars, go to a professional, have a mechanic take a look at it. It won't cost you that much, and it'll certainly be cheaper than buying a car that has that kind of an issue with it, or something else that's just as bad. I mean, it can easily cost you $2,000 or $3,000 by making a bad decision. So spend that $100 or $150 or whatever it is for a mechanic to give it a good once over. Well, Gunnar, one of the things that I really liked about your book, Generous Life Journey, and for those that listen to my podcast, they know that my wife and I have returned to the church from an absence, and kind of, as you said earlier, you kind of had that wayward path. Well, mine was a lot longer than yours, but I found my way back. And, reading your book, you have all kinds of really great financial information in there, and really some good nuggets. But the thing that really impressed me about the book is how well you documented it with Scripture. There's, I don't know that there's anything you talk about in there as a principle or a guide that you don't back up with a quote of Scripture. And that really told me, you did your homework on this. This wasn't something you just threw together, and it's obvious that you spent a long time putting this together and really researching it. And as somebody who's trying to help people get out of debt and do the right thing with their money, I really appreciate you doing that, and I highly recommend that people go out and buy this book and read through it and try to get a better understanding of what God wants you to do with your money. And Gunnar's got a great book here for that. So Gunnar, can you just tell me about the journey of creating a book that I view it as a financial book, but you may view it differently. What were your thoughts around putting all this biblical information into a financial book, and how was that greeted by other people you might have been working with when you were putting this together?
Oh yeah, it was highly encouraged by my team here and by the volunteers and the leadership here at the church. I really like people, and I want the best for people, but I'm also very, very skeptical. So anything someone tells me, I kind of, I'm nice about it, but I want to look it up for myself.
Right.
And so when I started teaching what the Bible said on money, I had to study it, had to research it. I really had to dig in to come to grips with it myself before I would even teach it or counsel on it. And then over the years, I had a handful of topical lessons that really hit home with people. Like, for instance, I do a chapter on savings. What does the Bible say about saving money? Another one, what does the Bible say about getting out of debt? How do you actually do it? I wanted to show what are the scriptures and how do we actually apply them, walk them out. What do I do today or tomorrow? So those lessons came together, and I used a lot of funny stories, a lot of illustrations, and eventually I looked up and noticed, you know what? I think I could add some things to all these lessons I've written and make a book out of it. So that's exactly what we did. And we've helped a lot of people using the book. It's been fun.
That's good. And it really does feel good to help people. I know, I'm sure you get a lot more feedback in your work at Gateway and from this book than I have from my little podcast here, but it is really rewarding to have people contact you and tell you how much they've benefited from the work that you're doing. So understand that, and that's really really awesome.
And besides that, what's kind of fun is those biblical principles transcend all socioeconomic statuses. They transcend all cultures. And I've had the opportunity to preach in London and Zurich, Switzerland, and I just last week returned from Israel, where I was teaching the same materials. All over the world, these biblical principles transcend culture. And so if I can show people how the maker of the universe has structured our lives financially, then it's really eye-opening. It really blesses, not just in our American culture, but anywhere and everywhere we go.
So Gunnar, I'm always encouraging people who listen to this show to, if they're going through a debt, crisis and they're trying to find their way out, that, maybe they go through an FPU class that might be put on at a local church by, from Dave Ramsey's organization. And when I think about that, I know not all the churches are going to be doing that, but one of the questions I had is, to your knowledge, do most churches these days have stewardship programs, and can most of our listeners go to their local church and find programs similar to the ones that you've discussed that are set up at Gateway?
Well, unfortunately, most churches don't have something in place. However, if they would like, my team trains churches on how to do the ministry that we do. We have a seminar called The Art of Stewardship that we'll train churches, usually 200 to 300 churches per year. And so, yeah, there's help is available. We also have a class called Route 7 that we run at Gateway. I'm a big Dave Ramsey fan. I love him. He's a good friend of mine. I support their ministry and what he's doing. And then Crown Financial Ministry and Compass Ministry is another couple of great ones. Good Sense, it's another ministry that's in churches. So, yeah, you can definitely get help at your church. However, if your church doesn't have the program of teaching the Bible on money, please contact me. I'll help. I'll help them get started. I do it free of charge, and we're freed up to help a lot of churches get this started.
Wow, that's really great. I mean, that just, that goes to tell me the heart of this whole stewardship program. And it's not just about saying, oh, we're just going to help the people that come to Gateway Church. We're willing, your staff and you are willing to reach out and help other churches get this started as well. I'm very very happy to hear that. I don't think I knew that piece of it. So that's very encouraging. So Gunnar, can you tell me where people can best find you and how they can best reach you? What's the best way for them to get a hold of you?
Well, the easiest way to find me is generouslifejourney.com. And there's some links for materials. I'm also easy to find at gatewaypeople.com, which is our church's website. And then please connect via Facebook, Twitter. There's not many Gunnar Johnsons out there, Gunnar. So you can locate me fairly easily.
All right. And Gunnar, as we wrap up here, what's one tip that you would give people who are facing a financial issue right now in their life, maybe looking at a mountain of debt? What's the one thing you give them to take away from this, and what could they do tomorrow?
First is a perspective tip. I'd say never underestimate the lessons of life that you're learning in the season. I know it's hard. I know it's challenging, but God's teaching something in these times. The other is don't ever give up hope. There's always a better day tomorrow, and with some careful planning and some meticulous management, you can get out of the situation, no doubt about it. I've seen people pay off millions of dollars. I've seen radical transformations. I see it over and over and over again. I kind of feel like a coach sitting on the wall saying, "Hey, you can do it. You can make it. Just don't give up. You can do it. Find you a good church, plug into that church body, and walk out this journey with other friends that are going through the same thing."
Yeah, I do think that's really important. If you can find other people who are similarly minded, then you've got a good shot. You get that support network going, you get some accountability going, and you can definitely do it. I mean, I've done it. Gunnar's done it. So we're talking from experience, and we've. And in my case, I've actually done it a couple of times, so I'm hoping this is the last time. I think I've learned my lesson. So yeah, it can definitely be done. Well, Gunnar, listen, I really appreciate you being on. It was an honor to have you on. Again, I really can't say enough good things about your book. It really meant a lot to me as I read through it, and I'm sure it's a book I'll return to many times because the way it's backed up by Scripture. I don't want to just live off ideas that I myself have, but I like to have some better grounding than that, and I can't think of better grounding than what's in the Bible.
Well, thank you for your encouragement. I appreciate the time today.
Thank you, and thanks to all my listeners, and I'm sure I'll be talking to you guys next week. Hey everybody, welcome back. I hope you enjoyed that interview with Gunnar. I'm not sure what the audio issues were during the call. I tried to sort some of those out on my end to see if I could, but I wasn't able to do much. But I think the interview has a great deal of value, and there's a lot of really good information there. Now, there were a couple of things that drew me to Gunnar's story. First of all was his personal journey. The fact that he started out in life going to church, but then went off to be his own person in business, and had built some successful business, and then he through kind of a circuitous route found his way back into the church, and really proved to himself as he studied the Word and felt like he was led by God to the point where now he sold that business and he's in full-time ministry helping others steward the resources that they've been given by God, and not only just people but churches as well. So I thought that was a really wonderful story, and it really resonated with me. The other thing, of course, was his book. I knew, again, based on the amount of notations and biblical references for all the things that he lists in his book, I knew that took a lot of time, it took a lot of effort, a lot of thought, and I was really impressed by that. And I thought that the combination of his story and the research he did to build the book and base it on the Bible the way he did, I thought that it would be something that would really resonate with a lot of people. So I thought it was really important to help get his message out. I wanted to have him on my show. I thought it would help my listeners. I think there's a lot of people out there who could use this message. So the book, again, is The Generous Life Journey, and you can go to generouslifejourney.com to get the book and make contact with Gunnar. In the show notes, which is going to be at cashcarconvert.com/013. Again, cashcarconvert.com/013. You can find all the show notes. So all the links that were discussed in the show, whether they were Gunnar's, Gateway Church, Dave Ramsey, Crown Financial, Compass Ministries, and Good Sense, all of those will be found in the show notes. So I hope you enjoyed the episode. One of the things that kind of jumped out at me, I mean, there's lots of good things about Gunnar's story, and there were lots of things he brought up, car mistakes that people have made that he knows. But the one that really stuck to me or jumped out at me was his discussion about the high-pressure salesperson who was really trying to get him to get into a car very quickly, not really do much research on it, didn't want him to take it to his mechanic and all these kinds of things. Ultimately, he did take it to his mechanic, and he found that vehicle had salt damage to the point where it would have been a real risk for he and his family to have that vehicle. And so it really, it brought to my mind that no matter how good you think you are with cars and what you know about cars, it's still good to have a mechanic look them over. Gunnar, who's been around cars, has rebuilt engines, said he himself crawled underneath that vehicle and didn't see it. So it's really good to have somebody that you can go to and count on to help you through those tricky times. The other point to that is that while there are lots of good dealerships out there and a lot of good people in the auto industry, there are some out there who are going to be less than truthful with you, and you have to guard yourself with that. So don't let your guard down. Don't succumb to high pressure. If you start getting pressure, just turn and walk out. Get back in your car and go back home. If you're determined to buy from a dealer, then go to another dealer and do that. But if you're following my path to getting your first car for under $5,000, then go back, do your research, go find a good used car that's being sold by an individual, and follow some of the steps I've outlined in some of my previous blog posts and previous podcast episodes, and walk through those steps. Be well prepared, and you'll come out okay on the other end of that. At least you'll stack the odds in your favor a lot more so than just walking into a dealership and saying, wow, that car looks really nice. Let me take it for a test drive. So just be really intentional with that. So I thought that was a really good lesson there. So with that, I thank everybody for listening. If you're enjoying this show and you're enjoying the direction we're going, let me know. Comments in the show notes page would be fantastic. Again, that's cashcarconvert.com/013. You can go to cashcarconvert.com/iTunes, and you can go out there and subscribe to the podcast, leave a rating and review. And I'm still offering the Dave Ramsey, Rachel Cruz book, Smart Money, Smart Kids. Once I get 50 ratings and reviews, then I'll be offering that up as a giveaway to one of those 50 people who've left a rating and review. So hopefully that'll give you some motivation. Again, this is an autographed copy that's been autographed by Dave and Rachel. So I hope that that'll be enough of an incentive to get you guys to subscribe, leave a rating, and a review. If you'd like to reach me, you can get me on Twitter @CashCarConvert, or you can shoot me an email at james@cashcarconvert.com. I'd really be interested in some feedback around where the show is going. I've done more interviews of late with people, again, to try to help with mindset, and it has to do a lot with where I'm coming from. When I was in the position of being in debt, the main thing that really helped me was understanding that I needed to change my mindset around some things and change my habits and my behavior. So I'm really trying to help with that piece of it. I think the mechanics of actually buying a car, even an inexpensive car, is relatively straightforward. And again, if you follow the steps I've outlined, I think it can be done, with the odds really stacked in your favor. But if I'm wrong about that, and those of you out there feel like you need more how-to content, then let me know. I will tell you that I do plan to do an episode on leasing in the not-too-distant future. I've had a few people talk to me about that, so I do plan to have a leasing episode in the not-too-distant future. But I've also got some really great guests lined up as well. So I know of 3 guests I've got lined up right now that I'm really excited about having all of them on, and I think you're going to really enjoy hearing from them as well. So with that, I'm going to sign off here. Thank you so much for taking the time to listen to the Cash Car Convert podcast. It means a lot to me. Talk to you next week.